All right, so far in the program, we've covered a lot of techniques. Like in section one, we covered like all these basic techniques, or foundational techniques, not really basic, but foundational.
Hmm.
And the second section of the program, we kind of started to build on that. But basically, what we've done so far is introduced a lot of techniques, right? Or like we were talking about the other day, tactics. So as we start to go into the third part of the program, I thought it would be a good idea to talk about overall strategy and how to like weave all the techniques together and how to decide what to do and when to do it and how much is enough and what's going to help us get over what hurdle and
Right.
those kinds of things.
Sure. Perfect.
So,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely. Yeah, we
so
can
where do we start with that?
wax on poetic about that.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know how much of that there's. I think one of the things with any program is that people want this very cut and dried sort of bullet point program.
Right.
And I get that part. I mean, that's a structure, and we like that, especially with something that's so amorphous, like a, let's call it overhead, energetic or spiritual program, right? It's like, okay, it's already pretty, I mean, I don't want to say wishy-washy, but, it's amorphous. It's hard to pin it down.
Yeah.
And so, except for things like, the tactics of it or the techniques of it, right? Um, so there is that desire for any person to want to really, get some cement in there, so to speak, earth it down a little bit and ground it in something that's practical and point by point. How do I get from point A to point B? Again, I think that's it's a good idea, and we're going to try to. I've always tried to, put that in there, but at the same time, there has to be that balance of flexibility as well, because not every person is the same, right? I mean, we have some general characteristics that are the same, but then there's some variation with each person. So, you have to take that into account. So there isn't a cookie cutter approach as far as that goes. And so as long as we sort of hold that in the background, sort of playing in the background constantly, then it'll give us a little leeway, and people won't feel like, oh, if I follow this exactly, but I can't follow it exactly, so I'm not doing it the right way. Or the opposite, it's so wishy-washy, there's no structure there, and I don't know where I am within the structure of the program. So I think you've got to constantly urge people to, have a certain amount of structure so that you have some valid metrics that you can go by to gauge where you are and and judge where you are, basically, just as landmarks, so that you know what I have to work on a little bit more, and then you can tease that out. And other things that you have to sort of sit back and go, okay, it's like, obviously for the type of person that I am, I need to have a little bit more leeway, or I need to work a little bit longer on this aspect. That's more difficult for me, where, other things may be much easier for you. And I find that that's the case with almost every person. There'll be things that are just like simple for them. They get it right on the very first time and it's perfect. And other things that they're just struggling over, and they have this idea that everything should be, just simple and goes in there, Yeah, it's all simple, but it's not easy. I mean, you take some diligence, right? And again, we're not all made up the same way. So people need to relax. This is a lifelong project. I mean, not the seeing itself, but the whole program. It's a small piece of a much larger construct, right? So, this is your life. It's like, you're not going to get it all. I mean, it's like, you can't just take a drop of something and expect that you're going to have all the wisdom of the ages packed into your head at age 10. So it's like, or 30 or 50, right? So, it takes time to sort of assimilate yourself to that, right? So there's a reason that people, basically, ask anybody who has exercised for more than a couple decades and they're in really good shape, right? I mean, you still get sore because you switch up your routines, right? You're constantly adjusting and reworking your routines, because everybody knows it's done that for a while. If you just keep doing the same thing, you're going to hit these plateaus where you're stalled. Nothing's really happening. Nothing's growing anymore. You're not getting any more flexible. You're not getting any more strong, all of those things. So it's the same thing with these types of, there's no difference with this.
So when you were originally learning these techniques and, for yourself specifically focused on opening your third eye and being able to see energy and going through that process, we know that you were in more of like a temple type of setting where it was a little bit more regimented, right? It was just like, do this, then we're going to do this, and now you're going to do that, and da 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 da. But did you get the sense that that there wasn't so much of a rigid structure there, like what you're saying now? Like there wasn't set daily routines, but their approach in teaching and guiding people through this process was similar to what you're describing?
I think it's a combination of two things. I think it was not a priority for them. The seeing itself was not a priority.
I see.
So, it was, I think of all the people that I know and from other people that I've questioned from other schools like that, the only people that really was a big thing for, or there was a little more emphasis put on it, were people that were going into a field where engaging with people, like medicine or something like that, it was more of a focus on that a little bit, not a lot. It wasn't like, okay, now you're going to go through 3 years of training of specifically learning how to do this. I've never met anybody that had that scenario. I took it upon myself because it wasn't emphasized. I mean, the things were there, but it wasn't emphasized. It was sort of like, when it happens, it happens. If it happens, it'll happen in, sporadically, but
nobody was going
after it, right? So it was like, I took it on myself to, push those techniques and constantly question about, how do I do this? How do I do that?
Do you think that you were inspired by a lot of the Castaneda stuff that you were reading?
I think it was partially that, and I thought that, thinking that, again, that for myself it was more like, what else could be done with that?
What else could be done with
the seeing ability? It wasn't just like, the coolness wears off after a very short period of time, right? Because again, if you do it correct, it's not like it's constantly on, right? It's like you're shifting. You have the control to turn it on and off. I mean, that's the ability you want to achieve. You don't want this blazing, whatever you want to call it. I mean, I don't have a name for it other than seeing. I mean, I try not to emphasize it or de-emphasize it, right? It just is. It's a technique. That's all it is. It's an ability. That's it. There's really nothing there that's, what I would consider. And maybe this is a key too for people, is like, I don't consider it to be like some kind of superhuman development. It's like, I mean, it takes time to develop it the same it would take time to develop a good body, or at the same time it would take to develop a skill of archery or whatever it is. It's like it takes years to do that really, really well, right? And if you want to be, what we would consider professional or something like that, very, in the 2% of that skill, where you have exquisite control and you can turn it on and off, and you can, you really just have ultimate control of that, that's 2%. I mean, it takes a lot of effort to do that. It means the effort toward other things is going to go by the wayside too, because you can't do everything every day. 24 hours in a day is not enough time to do everything that you could possibly do, even in this program. There's no way you could practice every technique for the right amount of time every day for the rest of your life. There's just no way. I mean, it's just too much for the course of a day. So you have to find, again, what are your priorities? What is it that you're trying to achieve ultimately? And, which things are going to give you the best leg up in getting that goal, right? And seeing is one of them, I think. So, but you can't spend 24 hours. I mean, you could, I guess. You could spend, 8 to 10 hours a day doing this stuff, but what other kind of life would you have if that's all you did?
So why do you think that in the Castaneda books, Don Juan, his teacher, put so much emphasis on that ability?
Because I think the only reason to do that, and for any school of thought to put that much emphasis on it, is because it goes it goes beyond the shadow of a doubt that there's something more than the physical reality that you see in front of you, and gives you a catapult into, like, just like I was thinking back then, what else could I do with this once that cool factor was gone, and impressing girls or whatever it was, whatever my ulterior motives were at the time, I can't even remember. But it's like, but once you get past that point, it's like, what else could that do? What else? How far could you take that, and what else would that? Is there a way for that ability to open up other avenues for you, or make it easier to go into other esoteric or other energetic faculties?
Well, can you answer that question?
Yeah, it does.
So how?
Well, again, it's like any other diagnostic. I mean, think about the way that we are as creatures, and we're mostly visual, So it's like, I mean, yeah, we have all these other senses, but really, you take those other senses away, you can pretty much still function in the world to some degree, right? But it's not as pleasurable for sure, but it's there. But you take your vision away, and a lot of times it's out of all of the senses, that's the most difficult one to navigate around without, right? So and so I think, drawing that analogy, it would be the same thing with seeing. I mean, you can obviously, without seeing, you can get to all of these other things. I know plenty of very good practitioners that can't see, but they've achieved a lot, without that ability. And so I just feel, at least for myself, and I think for most other people that I know that I've taught to do this, that it's opened up avenues of achievement in other areas that, that came to them a lot quicker using that skill. You can see, sort of the nature of things, and what things deserve your attention and what things don't deserve your attention. It all comes down to your ability to interpret the information that you're getting, just like, visual interpretation, right? Is, what is that thing that I'm looking at? Is it something harmful? Is it something benign? Is it something beneficial to me? What is it? And, a lot of times we're using visual representation as an initial,
Sure,
sort of diagnostic, to see if that's, something that, you'd want to put more, losing the words, like you'd want to investigate it a little bit more, and I think seeing is the same thing when you're dealing with the energetic realm, or, that underpinning of what's all here, the energy aspect that underlies, the physical matter and us and everything else that's here, then, you need a way to differentiate between them. And I find that seeing is a good way to differentiate what deserves your attention or follow up and what doesn't. You start to you literally see things in a different way, so you can see if something's not kind of in the way that you want it to go, then you can dismiss it. You don't have to waste time on that, because time is our most precious commodity, right? So, and we waste a lot of time, on just fooling around or doing whatever, right? It's like, and also looking at things. I mean, scientists, they're not wasting time, but they spend a lot of time, going down blind alleys or whatever, and finding out at the end that it doesn't go anywhere. And you have to do that. But, I feel that seeing is one of those things that can sort of cut those things down to a certain extent, so you're not wasting as much of your valuable time. And, yeah, so.
Okay, so then from a strategy perspective, going back to that, it's like, do you think that the whole, as we go through these techniques, hopefully we're doing as adequate a job of giving people the idea of, like, what does it look like when you can do that well, and how might you, or how should you feel after that, or, that sort of thing. So they have kind of an idea of,
after doing an exercise,
yeah, like what it's, yeah,
sure.
and I think we've done that fairly well so far, and hopefully we'll continue to. But do you think that as an overall strategy that since there's no like one size fits all, everybody has to go after the producing the ability for themselves, but always, keeping their own counsel about what practice to employ next to move themselves on their path?
Yeah, I mean, we give a general outline of that, obviously, more than a general outline. In my opinion, this is the way that it will progress the quickest,
Yeah.
right? But again, allowing for variability for each person, they can adjust those things slightly, although, the major, I think the way it would go if I were looking at it, and this is the way that I do things now, if I find that there's some procedure that I want to try out, I do it in the exact order that it was given. And then, if I feel like, okay, did I achieve the result? If I didn't achieve the result, or I want to make the result better, and I can look at that procedure and say, okay, it looks like I might need a little more work on this or a little more work on that. I'll go back without doing the whole thing over again and work on that one segment and then put it into play and see how that actually adjusts. I mean, we try to do it, in a way as systematic and scientific as we can, right? And because I feel that that's another one of those good aspects of doing this the way that we're saying, is that it takes a little more of that, amorphous nature of what we're doing out of the picture. It's like, okay, we're going to systematically track this down, do these techniques, see how, see what the end result is, and then go back and look at it again and adjust those things, do a little bit more work here, do a little bit more work there, try it again, see where it goes. We're really very systematic about, trying to always looking at the end result as being, paramount. It's like, forget about the technique, forget about the, the strategy overall, or even the more like when I'm doing it, I'm not analyzing at all. It's like I find that that's a critical thing that people need to cultivate in their own work, is that I find it's very difficult for most people to leave their analysis on their desk when they're doing a technique, right? It's like they just, they're analyzing as they're doing it, and or the analysis continues as they're doing it, and I find that that's a detriment. It splits your energy in two different directions. You're not fully engaged in the technique, and you're not fully 100% of your concentration isn't going on performing that technique to the best of your ability. Part of it's analyzing what's going on at the moment when it's happening. And you got to leave that for the end, for the beginning before you do anything, and then at the end when you're analyzing the result that you achieved. Don't try to analyze at the same time, because you're taking energy away from what you're doing. You've got to be really focused on what's going on, and that's more of the form and not the structure.
Right. So that just means that before you do the technique, ideally you would have a pretty good understanding of what each piece of the technique is for, and how it works. And
I mean, one of the things that, if we want to look at it, the broad program that we're doing, right, it's like one of the things that we hedge that a little bit with is that we do guided meditations, right? Which is, people don't have to, they can run through it. We give a little explanation ahead of time, but they don't actually have to think about memorizing the routine. They can just listen to it and follow along. Well, that sort of takes that analysis part out, because they don't actually have to, like, oh, what's the next step? Oh, what's the next? Let me immerse myself in the form of doing this and focus on this part of relaxation or whatever it is. But oh, what's the next body part that comes? Or it like slips in there all the time. If you're not completely sure of what's going on, it's like there's always an aspect of your mind that's going toward okay, what's the next step in the structure? What's the next step in the structure? And that again splits you in a way that bleeds off energy from focusing on just doing it to the best of your ability.
So decide in advance, or first of all, you're saying have a map of the exact technique step by step in your head, so you don't have to think about what comes next. That's what you mean by one of
Right.
the things that you mean by analysis.
Right.
So it's like you don't have to think about, what comes next, or what should I do next, or whatever. You already have a really clear idea of the technique in general and which technique you're doing and all that kind of stuff.
Right,
So
'cause
there's
one of the-
no like
Absolutely.
decision making in the middle.
That's right, because that's the thing. It's like, imagine that you're something as simple as relaxing the body. You get to, let's say, the left shoulder, and then, but part of your mind already is going like, okay, what comes next? Oh, the upper arm, the deltoid, the trap, or the bicep, the tricep. It's like there's a part of you, even for a split instant, that knows, this looking for that to be next. And so instead of it just naturally flowing into the next thing, that part of it has become so embedded, it's a natural flow. And that even if I were to skip that, I mean, most people, that would break the current there, so to speak, right? If they skipped the upper arm and went right to the elbow or something, it'd be like, oh, that little bit of is instead of just going back and doing it, or just keep going and forget about it, it'll catch up with the rest. That little bit of like, that rattled, as little as it seems, it does take you out of that flow. And so now you're basically, from where you've gotten to relax, it sort of bounces you back up again. And now it's like you're trying to go past that point again. And there's another piece of your mind that's always going back to like, you forgot that, you forgot that, you forgot that, you forgot that, so it's like wearing at you on a regular basis. So, being able to continually, know the structure so well that you're just going to move with it. And even if you do skip something is, something inconsequential is missing a body part with your relaxation, because that's going to relax anyway, right? So, that it doesn't trip you up.
Wow.
There's no stumble there.
I think that is a really important, subtle but important guideline for when you're sitting down to do any practice, right?
Yeah.
It's like literally to know like exactly what you're going to do, right?
Right.
And before you do it, and to understand and know the technique really well before you go through it, so that you can let that part of it go. Because
Right.
it didn't really, even for myself, I didn't think about it that way. Yeah, and but it's interesting as you're talking about it. That just seems like such a key point. That idea that like for every little question or thing that you might have missed, or whatever it is, every little thing that you focus on other than the doing of the technique takes away and robs your energy from the actual experience of doing it.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the whole idea with flow and focus, right? Is that, you have 100% or as close to 100% focused on what you're doing at that moment. Not fractured into, 15 different smaller versions that are all going against what you're trying to focus
Or
on.
even two.
Even two. That's right. That's right. That's right. I mean, and we get that idea, that's not my own thing. That comes from alchemy, where it's like, because the procedures are so specific, and, and some of them are long and very technical, right? So, I mean, laboratory alchemy, not, not spiritual alchemy. And so, we read through the whole technique to see what the end, and looking at what the end result is supposed to be. And then, we memorize that. We look at it and we memorize it. And then we go through each segment and analyze each segment. This is what we're doing here. This is how long it takes. This is, all the technical aspects too. This is the temperature this should be. This is how long it should be for. We memorize all of those components so that when we're in it, because not like chemistry where, I set it, put a timer on, I'm done, you walk away. When the timer goes off, I go back, I change it. It's like I don't really have to, it's not critical that I observe the process. In alchemy, we observe the process. We're mentally, we put a big emphasis on the, observer phenomenon. That what you want to happen is caused, partially at least, by observing it and expecting that to happen. And so that would be, a very, a, a, a difference between like chemistry and alchemy, classically. Okay,
Sure.
so if you apply that to even, any energetic practice, any spiritual practice, you're going to have the same thing. Read through it, sort of get a good idea of all of those things. Like what's the procedure exactly? It doesn't have to be a complete memorization, but you want to have a good sense of the flow of it. Because again, on the opposite side of that, I'm constantly telling people, just do it, just do it, just do it, because I don't want to stymie them by saying, oh, you have to memorize this whole thing before you can do it. And no, I want you to get in there, jump in with both feet and do it, because then you'll go back and you'll look at it again. Because believe me, if you forgot a part, it'll show up.
So, for instance, with something like the burning meditation, if someone were doing that, that's obviously got several steps in a specific order.
Right.
So, if someone was going through the relaxation and they got to, let's say, the end of the relaxation, right, and then they were going to begin the
Burning proper,
the
or
burning
whatever.
process, right? But they felt that their relaxation wasn't deep enough. Would you encourage them to
Go back and
go
do it
back
again.
and do more relaxation?
Yeah.
So, but wouldn't that be like, if I'm in the middle of doing that technique, wouldn't that be kind of like a point where I have to make a decision and I'm kind of like, bouncing myself back to the
Yeah.
beginning? And would that not represent some type of leakage of energy or focus in that way?
To some degree, I mean, yes, and at the same time, we don't want to be so rigid that we're just pushing through things for the sake of pushing through them, right? So it's sort of like I'm gauging it. If I'm still fidgety and I'm like, you're going to get 2% out of the burning anyway. So it's like, what's the point? In my way of thinking, it's like, isn't it better to go through and really force my body to be disciplined and shut down? Relax every muscle, relax every joint, do all those things, and even if it's to get a minute of burning at the end, it's going to be, that minute of burning is going to be more productive for you than 20 minutes of burning or 30 minutes of burning or 40 minutes of burning when you're still like fidgety and tense and your back hurts and you're going to get next to zero out of that. So it's much more important, that's a foundational practice.
But that would be different than going through the relaxation like halfway and then deciding to start over.
Yeah.
You would prefer that like you follow through at least like a segment of a practice from beginning to end, step by step, not questioning in the middle, just going through the process, focusing on each piece, and then if it didn't take you far enough or take you deep enough, then just coming back to the beginning of it.
Yes, but that being said, it's also, this is the point where the guided meditation is more rigid than than one that is not, where you're just doing it on your own, right? Because it would be very difficult for somebody to start a guided meditation over again. You can't go back. It's already continuing on. The process is continuing whether you're there or not. And, and now you're split because you're thinking, oh, I should go back and start this over again. Or, where if you're not using those audible cues, you can go through, and if you get through the body, you can just say, oh, wow, I'm still really, my back is knotted up, I'm not comfortable, let me readjust my position and start over and see if I can relax that. And, that's a much more flexible way of doing it. So, there is a real advantage of not doing the guided meditations, so, and that's what I feel that most serious people do, is that they use the guided meditations in the beginning to help them, get a feel for it, get a flow of it, that type of thing. And then, and it helps them to memorize as well, because, there is a little piece of their mind that will say, oh, this comes next, oh, this comes next, oh, this comes next. And it does, and it's a reward, little dopamine there, a little drop hit of that. And then you're moving on, and it's comfortable, right? You can relax a little bit more. You don't have to completely memorize it. But after a while, it doesn't take long. It's not that complex a meditation, right?
Sure.
And so, and then to do it on their own, there's a little bit more of a free flow there, because everybody will have a little bit different pacing. Everybody will have a little bit different time when, like we found that a lot of emotional trauma is wrapped up not in the muscles, but in the joints. in the joint spaces. So, for people like that, it's very it's very good for them to spend a little more time on the joints, every joint in the body, as opposed to the muscles. The muscle groups relax pretty well, but the joints hold a lot of emotional trauma. And so, relaxing those joints, going back and really taking your time to relax the joints from the finger joints all the way up, and maybe starting with the major joints, wrists and elbows, knees, shoulder joints, hip joints, those types of joints where they're bigger, and you'll feel like when you really focus on that, you can almost feel them, sort of opening a little bit. There's a little separation. You'll feel a little click or a little pop or something like that. And, and they usually, when they come through that and they go through the burning with that, they get a huge amount of relief, and it really stays with them much longer. So, it's not always, you can't always do that with a guided meditation because there's a pace to it, where, for somebody else who's memorized it, they can just sort of take their time.
And I think that, hopefully, thinking about this conversation as being a little bit more abstract, but taking that idea of the burning meditation that, as an example in this conversation, almost like a microcosm for the whole program, right? Because all the things that you're talking about these personal details is like applicable to the course as a broader whole, I think, and any technique that you're working on. It's hard to kind of pin down like exactly how to do, each thing, because like, or how to combine all the techniques in the best way for an individual, because at the individual level it becomes so nuanced.
Right. And again, sort of going back a few questions prior, one of the things that should be kept in the back of everybody's mind when they're doing the program is that, yes, it's good for you to go through these things and sort of muddle through them as much as you can in the beginning. But if you get, stuck in a place, or there's a hurdle that's particularly difficult and you're not really sure, you've tried a bunch of different ways to get over it and it's not working for you or whatever, then, that's a great time, to say, okay, well, I've done my best trying to get through this. Maybe I can just, maybe I could get a question answered or a little bit of help to, sort of get a different opinion of how to get through that. And, I think that that's one of the best parts of this program is the question and answer part, because, again, when one person asks the question, I guarantee you there's 30 other people that were thinking that question and they just didn't ask it. But it's going to affect everyone in a positive way. So, and I believe that that's, again, one of the best parts of this compared to other programs is the question and answer portion of that, because we can cut the learning curve down so much and it doesn't take a lot. Sometimes it's just a very simple adjustment to sort of get through that blockage, and then you're off and running again. So, that's another good thing about, having that individual approach. It's like, yeah, it's a lot more flexible, but you can come up against stuff that you've tried all the tricks that which maybe not many at this point, and but it's just not going, and so you can't ask a book a question. So the book isn't going to help you get over that hurdle. Right. And and for a lot of these famous authors, they're not going to be available for you to ask a direct question. And so and again, I think that's one of the better aspects of this program is that we're here to answer your questions. Whatever comes up, it's probably something that we have seen in the past in one variation or another, and the fix is usually quite simple. So it's just a matter of hearing it. And a lot of times when I say something to somebody, and they'll go like, "Oh, I thought of that, but I didn't do it," or "That makes so much sense. Okay, let's just do that."
Right.
And it's not some, go off and meditate for 10 days in the woods to figure it out on your own. No, it's, try this.
Right.
I think this will hit it nicely for you. And if not, let me know and we'll find it. There's a million ways to get around this. It's just a matter of finding what's going to be most applicable for you. And, we try to base it on people's experience as well, right? So that way, it's not something that's so foreign to them. and we go from there. But that's where we've seen the biggest successes for people here, is that we're not trying to give people a completely different mode than they're used to or what they've trained with. Whatever they've done for training in the past, doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it was even all that good, but whatever it was, there's a way to sort of couch it in that technique to kind of help you not feel like you're starting all over again, for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
So
cool. All right. Thank you. I mean, I know it was a little bit more abstract, but but hopefully there were some details in there that will be helpful for people as they're going through, depending on like where they're at and which technique they're working on and so on.
And I think the basic idea in the end, if we wanted to make it all succinct, is to everybody really knows when they're being lazy and when they're being, overly hard on themselves. I think if people are honest, they really do know that. And so, it's to, don't beat yourself up over stuff that that takes a long time to figure out and experience, revel in the richness of the experience that you're exposed to and that you're exposing yourself to. And, find the joy in that. And then, and the adventure of it, right? It's a journey. It's not like, eat these pills and you'll be better tomorrow, Take this, 2 blue pills and a glass of water and your headache will be gone in 30 minutes. It's not that cut and dry. This is your life, and hopefully your life isn't going to be that short. So, it's an extended journey. So, don't rush by what's going on right now in order to, try to jump to the next thing. You're not putting enough appreciation on what's going on right now in front of you. It's like, it's not all about, an ability or all of these things. It's like, try to, find that excitement, in the process of exploring and finding out all these things, because you're not just trying to acquire that ability, you're finding things out about yourself, which will be applicable in every aspect of your life. And I think that that's another, that's sort of the point of all of this in this conversation right here, is that, it's supposed to help you in everyday life. I think any spiritual practice that doesn't do that is a waste of time. If it's always pushing it out to, after you die, after, or, in 20 years or whatever it is, it's like, it should help you right now. Yeah, you can have a goal or, a strategy that's trying to get you to this end result, whenever, in a certain amount of time, hopefully. But, that doesn't negate what's going on right now. And whatever techniques that you're practicing, whatever you're trying to achieve, you should come out of every one of those sessions, even if you didn't achieve it, feeling like, wow, that was that was a wild ride, Or even I learned something about myself in that, and I learned, okay, maybe I need a little more work in this territory or whatever. Yeah, I didn't achieve the goal, but I know what next step to take, and so the next experiment's going to be even better.
Right.
And that attitude, fostered over and over and over again, brings a new appreciation for the rest of your life. All the other aspects of your life, which hopefully, if you're doing this right, this is infiltrating and being the base which infiltrates your whole life, right? I mean, that's our basic premise. That's my basic premise, is that, this is sort of the base that infiltrates everything in my life. My relationships, my success with whatever I'm doing, right? My health and, my spirituality. This is the practice that sort of is the base of all of that and infiltrates every aspect of that. And so every little thing that I do, every technique that I practice, every result that I get, it gives me information and helps me enjoy and, really live fully, all the other aspects of my life. That should be your a good litmus test for you for anything that you're doing. Does it actually make the rest of your life better? Not just the achieving of the goal, but does the practice make your life better every day in every area of your life? That's a good litmus test to check in with on a regular basis. If it doesn't, if you're still a miserable curmudgeon, or you're still sad all the time, or you're still this or you're still that, then something's wrong. Your practice isn't working. If you still feel wanting constantly, your practice isn't working. It shouldn't be that way.
Or you're just applying what you're doing, or
in this little segment. But that's the argument that a lot of people have with esoteric practice, let's say, is that it's an escape. It's like video games, or you're just doing it, and it has this, you get this enjoyment for a couple of hours, and because it pulls you away from society or isolates you into this fantasy world or whatever, that you're basically escaping from the real world, the real life, right? And it's like, and for me it's very simple. If what you're doing in those times of practice is helping you live in the real world in a better way, and not just for you, but of course, if you're living in a better way and you're enjoying your life more, the people around you are going to enjoy your life more. You're going to feel like you can give more to your family and your community and your friends, and and your life is going to be better in every way that you can think of. Then you're that sort of negates that idea of you're just escaping. It's not a drug trip. It's not like I just need a relaxation and give me a scotch and let me just fall asleep on the couch. He's sitting in front of the brain eraser, and watching meaningless stuff that just sort of drones you out into oblivion. That's an escape. It's like, this helps you, really engage your life on every level that I can think of, if it's done correctly. It's not an escape whatsoever. Just my opinion.
It's working for me.
It's working. That's it. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.